Were these documents submitted with your response letter?
Yes, they were.
And while not required for conditional use, did you preliminarily engineer a stormwater management system for the proposed conditional use plan?
Yes, we did.
And what ordinances or regulations did you review in preparing the stormwater management design?
We used Chapter 144 of the Township Codes, which is the Stormwater Management Ordinance, and also the PADEP Chapter 102 Stormwater Regulations.
Okay, and how did you analyze the existing conditions and watersheds on the property when deciding how to engineer the stormwater management design for the property?
There are two drainage sheds on the property. The major one, which a majority of the water would flow to, is to the southwest of the site towards New Street, and a small portion of the site drains to the northeast to the area of Route 202. The cover types that we used for the stormwater calculations were woods and row crops, but we used meadow instead of the row crops. And also for the area to the northeast towards Chester Creek, which I previously talked about, the small drainage area towards 202, we used B meadow for all types, which is required under the township ordinance.
And is using meadow instead of the row crops a more conservative stormwater analysis?
Yes, it is.
And what watershed or watersheds is the property located in?
Like I said, there's two watersheds. The major watershed, which is roughly 300 acres, drains to the southwest and is part of the Radley Run, which ultimately would drain to the Brandywine Creek watershed, and is classified as warm water fisheries and migratory fisheries. The other portion of this, the smaller portion of the site, which is roughly 10 acres, drains to the northeast, and that goes to the Chester Creek, which is part of the Chester Creek watershed, and that area is classified as trout stocking fisheries and migratory fisheries. Neither of these two areas are high quality or exceptional value watersheds.
Okay. And did you consider the suitability of the soils on the property for stormwater purposes based upon GTA's soil test results, which were previously testified to?
Yes, we did. We used the GTA soils reports for infiltration properties on the soils.
Okay. And as a result of more recent soils testing by GTA, did you revise the locations, the proposed locations of some of the stormwater basins?
Yes, we did.
Okay. I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A72, which is a revised overall site plan dated October 9th, 2020. Is this the revised site plan you prepared?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What stormwater changes did you make to the overall site plan, Exhibit A72?
This Exhibit A72 shows in the darker black shading and line work the proposed changes. There are in red, also shown on this plan, is the original lot layout and the original basin locations and sizes of them. So there were minor modifications using GTA's new information to resize and possibly relocate slightly some of the basins throughout the property.
Jeff, let me just clarify. The red areas, are those the areas where the basins were shown in Exhibit A65?
That is correct.
Okay, so those are the prior locations that have now been moved based upon Exhibit A72, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And did some of the elevations get adjusted of those basins as a result of the additional testing?
Yes, the additional testing from GTA gave us better elevations to use for the basin bottoms of the proposed stormwater facilities.
Greg, can I ask a question real quick? I'm sorry, it's Pat.
Sure.
A72, what sheet of the sheets in A65 does it propose to replace?
Oh, it would be the overall site plan.
Do you know what sheet number that is?
I think that was, I think it might have been sheet 12, but I'd have to go back and check.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Jeff, just for clarification, this A72 did not change any of the proposed unit locations or unit count or mix, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So staying on the stormwater management, how does the stormwater management system function as proposed on the plan?
There would be in the proposed design, inlets and swales would bring the water from the lots and the roads to the basins. As I previously stated, there's 10 basins on the site. The basins are routed to reduce the flows and discharges to below the required pre-development conditions, which is equivalent or less depending on the storm.
I lost you on the last sentence, Jeff. If you could repeat that, please.
Sure. The basins were routed to have an equivalent or less discharge depending on the storm of the year of the storm, whether it's 1 year or all the way through 100 years of the storms.
Okay, and is that in the post-development condition?
That's correct.
Okay. Are the basins of the stormwater system intended to infiltrate?
Yes, they are intended to infiltrate. We've designed the basins to use 1/2 inch per hour in the design, and all the infiltration basins would drain within the 72 hours of the storm ending. And also, the basin floor is set 2 foot above the separation of the groundwater.
I'm sorry, did you say 2 feet separation from the groundwater?
Correct, 2 feet of separation from the groundwater.
And where do the basins discharge, or where does the stormwater system discharge?
All the basins would have an outlet structure in each basin, and they would be discharged towards the water courses.
Okay. And at what rate or volume?
For the rate of the Brandywine Creek watersheds, there shall be a reduction depending on the storm. For example, the 2-year post-developed flow rate has to be reduced to the 1-year pre-developed flow rate, and the rest of the storms can have a equal or less storm-to-storm comparison. The second area is the Chester Creek watershed, and that has a requirement to lower all storms by 50% of the rate.
What was the reduction again for the Brandywine watershed?
The main reduction of the Brandywine watershed is the 2-year post to the 1-year pre, and then all the higher storms can have a pre to post requirement of the complementary storm, 5-year post versus 5-year pre, and so on.
Okay. And how will water quality be addressed generally throughout the site?
Sure. There would be non-structural or qualitative, and some structural or qualitative BMPs located throughout the site. Some of them shown on this plan include the location of the infiltration basins.
And what does BMP stand for?
Best management practices.
Okay. And are those BMPs regulated by the township?
They are regulated through the ultimately through the DEP and the DEP manual, and through the arm of the DEP at the local conservation district.
Okay. And will Toll likely have to implement stormwater best management practices, or BMPs, as part of the overall system?
Yes, we will.
Okay. And based on all of your analysis and preliminary design, do you have an opinion as to whether the proposed stormwater management system is feasible?
Yes, it is definitely feasible. The overall stormwater management will control the required rate and volume and meet the regulations.
Okay. I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A73, which is an updated stormwater management narrative prepared by ESC Consultants, dated October 2020. Did you prepare this exhibit?
Yes, I did.
And does Exhibit A73 support your opinion that the stormwater management system is feasible?
Yes, it does.
And I think you just touched on it, but who will ultimately have to review, approve, and permit the stormwater management system?
The township, and then the local conservation district, or ultimately the DEP.
Okay. And when typically is the stormwater management system fully engineered and designed?
During the land development process.
And in your experience, will the design undergo some modifications or changes once you get into full engineering?
Yes, it will.
If we go back to Exhibit A72, which was the overall site plan showing the stormwater management basin relocations, were there any other changes that you made to this plan?
Yes, at the request of the township traffic engineer.
Jeff,
there was a
sorry,
request
Jeff.
to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You broke up again, so let me repeat the question. Going back to Exhibit A72, the revised overall site plan, were there any other changes made to the plan?
Yes, there were 2 locations of right angles, intersections, that were removed, which ultimately pushed a couple of those areas farther west to accommodate the radial curves.
And why were those right angles removed?
At the request of the township traffic engineer.
Okay. I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A74A through F. And without having to go through each of the sub-exhibits, what are these exhibits depicting? Exhibits A74A through F.
There's feedback.
Wait 1 second. There we are. Okay. So let me repeat the question. Without going through all of the exhibits A74A through F, could you please describe what these exhibits are depicting?
Those are the profiles of the locations along the roads which changed due to the removal of the 2 right angle intersections requested by the township traffic engineer.
Okay. Is the applicant required under the ordinance to widen existing adjacent township-owned roadways?
Yes, they are.
I believe Ms. Klein testified regarding widening of West Pleasant Grove Road, isn't that correct?
Yes, she did.
Okay, I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A75. And if you could please describe what Exhibit A75 is depicting.
Yes. A75 is the plan view along South New Street South New Street is classified as a township collector road, and the applicant would widen on the project side of the road frontage, from the center line to a total of 14 foot towards the property, with a 30-foot right-of-way. On average, this would widen the South New Street on the applicant side roughly 4 feet, to bring the total width to approximately 24 feet throughout several locations.
After commencing hearings on the conditional use application, did Toll go back before the Township Planning Commission to have further discussions on the overall site plan?
Yes, they did. Toll presented an alternative site plan to the Township Planning Commission over a number of meetings.
Okay, and did you attend those meetings?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A76. And could you please just generally describe what is being shown here on Exhibit A76?
Yes, there is multiple colors on this plan. The underlying red color is the original conditional use plan, depicted ghosted in the background. And the darker line work throughout this site would be the proposed alternative.
Jeff, I'm sorry, you broke up again. So you broke up where the underlying red was the ghosted, and then from there. You can pick up, please.
Yes, the underlying red area, which is ghosted, is the original conditional use plan. The darker, bolder lot lines and roads is the alternative layout, which was brought before the Planning Commission. Some of the changes include shifting the entire development hundreds of feet eastward. This also would increase the contiguous open space by roughly 20 acres. It increases the trails and pedestrian connectivity. This plan proposes public sewer on the site. It does provide a...
Jeff, you said proposes public sewer, and then you cut out again.
This proposes public sewer on the site.
Okay.
This plan shows a few conceptual school bus stop locations. It provides public trail easements, an equestrian trail easement along the by the intersection of 926 and South New Street. It has a few locations for trail parking, one of which is located along the eastern portion of the collector road by 202, right above the between the townhomes and the church property. It eliminates the right angle internal intersections that was previously discussed, and we also eliminated one of the entrances off of West Pleasant Grove Road.
Is it the same number of overall units, new residential units?
Yes, it is.
Does the mix change a bit?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And there's a couple of other lines on the western portion of the property. There's a red line and a yellow line. Can you please describe what the red line is?
Yes. These are different classifications for areas of open space. To the west of that red or pink line, there is roughly 67 acres of open space.
Jeff, hold on.
And
What does the yellow line depict?
yes, and that's where I was going to next.
Please.
The yellow line depicts 78 acres, roughly, of open space to the west of that yellow line.
And is the red line representative of the open space area under the Exhibit A65 conditional use plan?
Yes, yes it is.
Okay. And the yellow line is representative of the open space area under this Exhibit A76 alternate site plan?
That's correct.
Greg, can I ask a quick clarification question, please?
Sure.
Jeff started off by saying that the red lines, the ghosted areas, were the original conditional use application. Can we be more specific? Does he mean as it relates to Crebilly 1, or does he mean as it relates to Exhibit A65?
Would be A65, correct, Jeff?
That is correct. I apologize for not clarifying that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jeff, does this alternate site plan, Exhibit A76, require waivers from the subdivision and land development ordinance and/or stormwater management ordinance?
Yes, it would.
I'd like to show you what I've marked as Exhibit A77, which is a January 27, 2020 memorandum from you to me and Andrew. Does this memorandum list some of the waivers that you determined would be required for the alternate site plan, Exhibit A76?
Yes, it does.
And if you were to fully engineer this alternate site plan, do you believe it's possible additional waivers may be required?
Yes, they possibly could be, yes.
Okay. And based upon your knowledge, do you know whether the Planning Commission recommended approval of this alternate site plan?
No, they did not recommend approval. They recommended denial of the alternative site plan and ultimately the conditional use application.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Madden.
Thank you. Before we take a quick break, though, I need to clarify one thing on Exhibit A77, and either Jeff or Greg. There are an abundance of waivers that were listed. I just need to clarify, are we saying all of those waivers are required in order to provide and construct the alternate plan in A76?
That is correct, based upon the best of our knowledge at this point in time.
And then are we suggesting that the original plan A65 requires no waivers?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, well, it's 8:30. I would suggest we take our break at this point for 7 or 8 minutes, and then we can come back and begin our cross-examination, if that's all right with my chairman.
That's fine, if you can hear me.
Okay. Yep,
Thank you.
I can. So we'll go off the record now for 7 or 8 minutes. Take our break.
Okay.
Hey, Pat, would it be possible for me to ask a question when we come back? And even though there might be others who, the other parties usually come first, I have this, just need a clarification if possible.
Sure, I don't see why not to.
Thank you.
Can you hear me, Mila?